Welcome to the third episode of Inside the Salesforce Ecosystem, where we dive deep with the experts and trailblazers shaping the future of Salesforce. I'm your host, Luke White, and in every episode, we explore the unique journeys, challenges, and insights of those making the ecosystem thrive. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Antony Daley, Senior Solution Consultant at Hyphen8. Antony brings a wealth of experience from managing complex Salesforce projects to fostering key partnerships with industry leaders and, of course, Salesforce itself. So thank you, Antony, for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm excited to hear about your journey, the work that you do at Hyphen8, and of course, the insights you have for the ever-evolving Salesforce ecosystem.
Yeah, it certainly never stops growing, that's a fact.
Indeed. Right, let's dive in. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Hyphen8?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a senior solutions consultant. I always play this title down a little bit with customers, just as someone who deals with building Salesforce systems. But because we're an implementation partner and we deal with so many small projects and of different sizes all the way up to like the big size projects, we do everything. We're consultants, we're coaches, problem solvers, everything that comes with, customer facing roles. There's a good bit of scoping, which is designing the actual project itself, working with the customers to figure out what it is they want. Quite similar to that of an architect in a lot of ways. We deliver the project. So a lot of the times if we're the lead, we're working with the team on actually building it. If we're not the lead solutions consultant, then we're the ones building it. So we're the ones getting stuck in, creating the objects, the fields, and everything you need. And we do pretty much everything from end to end, mainly making sure that ideally we deliver something the customer loves. It's within scope, it's within budget. So like there's the financial responsibility as well. So it's quite a wide reaching role. It is very fun as well.
You mentioned a few things, and I'm sure sometimes you're even a counselor to those customers as well when they're going through changes and trying to work out what they want and don't need, and when things go wrong or not how they expect it to be.
Yeah, asking why do you do that, and why do you want this? Sometimes that's the fun of the job actually, because everyone is different, and as much as it sometimes sounds like, oh, this is the same as insert customer X that we did 6 months ago, they then say they do it for a completely different reason, and you're then sat there going, huh, how am I going to do that in Salesforce? How do I translate that into something Salesforce can do, ideally without building something bespoke and custom for them as well? So, yeah, good fun. It is a good puzzle every now and then.
Yeah, exactly, and they're the good ones. They're challenging, but they're the most rewarding probably as well. I'd imagine once they're done, the challenging ones.
Yeah, very much so. Especially as most of our customers are charities as well. It's non-profits, so I always get that lovely little feeling of making a bigger difference at the end, not just finishing a nice Salesforce project. So.
Yeah, I guess at that point you're not paying into some CEO's pocket somewhere or to the shareholders somewhere. You're actually helping a cause and a mission that
Yeah.
that charity is going after.
100%, 100%. It's the main reason I've been at Hyphen8 as long as I have, because the difference I feel we make is worth the headaches that sometimes come with having so many projects over the course of a year and dealing with so many different ways of doing it. It is a difference. It's a nice difference as well. I'm not saying
Yeah.
the big corporate world is bad or anything, but it's a little bit more special when it makes a difference and it's for a good cause.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So how did your journey begin in the world of Salesforce, and what sparked your interest into sort of becoming a solution consultant that you are today?
It is actually a long story, which I will not bore you with, but there is a short version of this. So my history is actually in customer service and tech support. So I have done every job within a call center, which don't hate me for it. I know call centers get quite a bit of a bad rep these days, and I did it a long time ago when they got a really bad rep for things like cold calling and stuff. But
Mm.
the customer service side of things, the technical support side of things, working with such a huge team, it was good fun. But by the end of it, I just hated it. I hated what people thought about people who worked in call centers. And every day you just deal with people who complain and complain and complain and complain. And it got to the point I just hated it. So I did a career switch. I actually went to uni as a mature student. I decided I grew up with computers in the 80s and 90s. I was the kid in the family that everybody came to when the printer didn't turn on. How do you know, do the clock on the VCR type thing? So I thought, you know what, I'm all right with computers. So I did computer science,
Okay.
and one of the modules was Java programming, and I actually really liked it, and I thought I could do this. So I actually started as a developer. Um, and having finished uni, I was engaged at the time. There weren't very many jobs in the Northeast, so I was quite happily looking for any type of graduate entry-level developer role. And a recruiting consultancy at the time went, "Have you ever heard of Salesforce?" And I'm going, "No, no idea. What is it?" And it's like, "Well, it's a CRM. Well, I know what they are. I've used a lot of them." Oh, right. Well, it's one of them. It's quite growing. It's quite popular in the States. It looks like it's going to be quite big in Europe. And there's a consultancy down in the southeast of England. So I ended up interviewing as a developer. So yeah, so I actually got into Salesforce because I hated my old career, wanted a career switch, always enjoyed computers, became a developer, and then yeah, moved from the northeast to the southeast and started as a developer. Yeah, it's quite a it's quite a switch. But my fiance, now my wife, came with me, and she's also in the ecosystem as well. So it's
There you
good.
go.
Yeah.
Something's right there. So yeah, but yeah, it's a story you hear a lot actually. That career switch into Salesforce. I think Salesforce have built this community in and around it, and love it or hate it with everything like that. But there is an awful lot of people who have switched, and it's a familiar story we hear that they've switched careers, and when they do, Salesforce seems to be the one that is that switch. It's not doesn't seem to be anything else.
Yeah.
Salesforce seems to be the one that drives that.
Yeah, it's this, and I'm going to say the dirty word, Microsoft Dynamics, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
seems to be the other one, but it's such a good system. It it's an odd one because it is such a good system in a way that if you've used it and you've seen what it's like as a user, it's actually not that hard to transition into being like a super user. And a super user's one step behind becoming a system admin. And because Salesforce have built up, and although this wasn't around when I started, they've built up Trailhead, they've built up this massive, free, easy learning tool that isn't just a series of instructions on how you do something. It's just a series of instructions on here are all of the things you can do to learn to do my job or my colleague's job or a technical architect's job or an admin's job or a business analyst job. It just makes it so easy for you to start at the very bottom and learn it as you go. And because it's so popular and because so many people are using it, demand has been high. So it's meant you've got people like me who came into the industry originally with no Salesforce knowledge, but an underlining knowledge of something related to it. And it's so transferable, hit the ground running.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a that's what Salesforce have done well. We've talked to some other guests, and the Trailhead has been a big plus definitely for the way it is. And it's like that. I suggest that I speak to family and friends, and they go, "Oh yeah, I know Salesforce." They recognize it from the F1, or they recognize it. They know it, but don't actually couldn't tell you what it is. So okay, well, I'll give you a little bit of background. And, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then they
Yeah.
sort of, oh yeah, I've used a similar system, and they're like, yeah, you've probably used Salesforce. You're just not aware. You've clicked on the Salesforce button probably at some point. But yeah, no, it's definitely the way forward. So taking a look now as your role and what you do at Hyphen8. Obviously, we know that Salesforce is great, but then there are potential gaps that Salesforce has that are then filled by ISVs, and so with your vast experience and the wide range of tools and integrations that you've done, from document management through to bespoke case management solutions as well, which of these have been the sort of the most rewarding to work with, and why?
But in terms of third-party products per se to the Salesforce
Yes.
ecosystem,
Yeah.
so I think for I'm gonna kind of go with for me personally, and from a Hyphen8 perspective, there's two types of products that we tend to find Salesforce doesn't do very well. One is document generation, which is how we've come to using PDF Butler,
Indeed.
which is actually over the last 6 months since we started picking it up and transitioning from some of your competitors. Internally, everyone who's used it has loved it, and it's been lovely. Which is always weird saying that when you're being interviewed by the person who works for them as well. So I don't
Yeah,
want to sound like I'm being biased, but we did
yeah.
actually
We've not paid
purposely
him.
choose.
We've not
Yeah,
paid it. We've not paid you
I've
to
not
say
been
that. So
paid for this, but
yeah.
no, internally we have actually made the decision that that will become our kind of go-to document
Yeah.
generation tool, um, because it's good and it's cost effective. And when you work with charities, the pennies really do count. And on the other side, it's web forms and form tools. Salesforce obviously has the digital experience. Experience Cloud is a really good way of opening up access, but a lot of smaller customers don't want nor need to open up their access to people. So we tend to find we use a lot of web form tools. There are companies out there like Form Stack and Form Assembly, and obviously yourselves do a very, I'm going to say very basic
Yep.
entry form tool. They're the two that we kind of always end up using. Um, don't really have a favorite, uh, which for anyone at a Hyphen8 probably listen to this is probably gone, you always recommend like one or two products. And it's probably true, I do, but that's because they're normally the right tool for the job. And being a consultant, we consult, we ask the why you're doing it, what do you want to get out of it? We then go and find the best tool. And sometimes that's Salesforce's own stuff. Sometimes it's a third party product. Sometimes we have to build it ourselves. And we build accelerators. And sometimes we find that actually some of the really simple things that Salesforce don't do, we can fill the gap for. Um, and it's the little things that make the biggest difference sometimes. So I don't have a favorite, sorry.
No, don't need to pick favorites here, especially when there's a PDF butler on the table as well. So I won't push you for a favorite today. Um, so linked to that, actually, I think it's an interesting point you just mentioned about building it, and I think that's one thing that the Salesforce platform does enable developers and people like yourselves to do is to actually build stuff on the platform.
Yeah,
A lot of CRMs are like, well, here's the box. You can sort of like bend it, but that's it. But with Salesforce, you can actually build it as well. So I think that's an interesting thing that Salesforce does deliver to people as well, the extendability.
yeah. Funnily enough, that's how I stopped being a dev, in all honesty. Because my background was in customer service and tech support, and I'd used a whole range of like CRM and sales systems from my call center days. When I was doing the initial kind of development work, and I had the solutions consultants and the architects and the pre-sales people kind of saying, oh, this is what we want. I was always kind of sat there in the back of my head going, call center me would, I'm not going to say hate this, he just wouldn't, this could be so much better. So I started asking the questions internally, and I think it was about after about a few months, I was no longer officially just a junior dev. I was a developer consultant, a technical consultant, because I was writing code and asking the questions, and I just couldn't help drag my old career back into it, and just kind of transition away. But it is because you can build stuff and you can ask the stuff and you can figure out, well, what is it we're trying to do? Do we need to build something really complicated, or can we keep it quite simple and straightforward and go from there? But you're right, Salesforce does most of the time make that really easy. And when it doesn't, we get products like yourself who really do fill the gaps it just doesn't do. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's so. I think that's perfect. Coming back to it a little bit about sort of the ISV world as well.
mm,
So I know obviously previously you've also had you've had some responsibility at Hyphen8 for sort of partnership management as well. So how have you found sort of like your working in the partnership of ISVs and obviously Salesforce directly itself shaped your perspective of the collaboration that does happen within the ecosystem?
um, it's probably shaped it in both positive and negative ways. So from our perspective, or also from my perspective, we work with charities. The vast majority of my time I've been in Salesforce for coming up 15 years now. I've been at Hyphen8 for approaching a decade. So I've spent a lot of time with charities. Cost is always a really important factor. And a lot of the really good products that both Salesforce and third parties do are expensive and therefore off the table. For a lot of our customers, we kind of have to sit there and go, oh, actually, you know what, that Marketo or the Marketing Cloud or some of the really good tools that Salesforce have done, you just can't do. So then we look at tools like yourself and your competitors like Conga and DocuSign, and Conga advertise themselves as a Rolls-Royce solution, but they also cost a lot of money. And then we get products like yourself, which actually probably do as much as your big competitors and don't cost anywhere. So having that kind of competition in the market and the fact it's so big, and there are probably a few dozen document generation providers, and I'm going to use yourselves as an example, means we've always got choice. And when Salesforce don't do it, we can come to someone like yourself and go, this is what we're looking to do. And I actually had a few conversations with your CEO at the start about, we'd love to use some parts of your products, but they don't really suit the nonprofit world. They don't quite do what we're looking to do. And this is the positive side of the ecosystem, is people like Igor will sit there and go, okay, I think we can improve that. And then 3 or 4 months later, I get an email going, so we've built a UI for the web form tool. Do you want to give it a try? Will that make your lives a little bit easier? And we can sit there and go, that's really good. You don't get that elsewhere, I don't think. Normally you go buy a product and that's it, it's done. But because Salesforce is always got those releases, the partners are always like yourselves, they're always trying to keep up to date. Consultancies like ourselves, we're always learning new stuff. Obviously, we've got huge emphasis on things like AI at the moment and how we can potentially use that. And we constantly keep growing. To me, though, that's also a slight negative of the ecosystem in that it is constantly trying to move forward. It's constantly trying to find the next big thing, the next new thing. And that can make it really difficult for the smaller organizations, the smaller partners, the smaller product suppliers, the smaller ISVs to actually keep up. So there is a balance there. Inherently, it's good because typically it means whenever you're getting Salesforce or a product, you know it works and you know it delivers. And if it doesn't, you said it earlier on, you can always go and customize it and build it to do it yourself. But it does make it a little bit interesting in that regard.
Yeah, I also think the community has got it's got a good spirit at heart as well, and I think there's a lot of it. So from like London Calling community event, which is a really good one, and I've been to various different community events across the globe, fortunately, and they've all got there's a good feeling behind it. It's not always unicorns and glitter. People know where there is issues and where there isn't. No company is perfect, let alone a massive company like Salesforce. And no company can be perfect. But I think the ethos behind the community is there and the community spirit is there.
Definitely.
Which I think is something that Salesforce have done very well, considering how big and how fast Salesforce has grown. The grassroots seem to still be very positive, which I think is a benefit.
I think they learned quite a long time ago actually to stay quite hands off with their partners and ecosystem and just there's a saying, it's let them cook, isn't it? It's just let them do their job. Like, you've got this system that encourages people to create their own solutions, do their own thing. Hyphen8 have got a good history of being involved in the non-profit side of things, with how grant making has grown within the Salesforce ecosystem. And I know our CTO, Dan Probert, he's had numerous conversations with Salesforce over the year about how the grant making product work, how the non-profit cloud side of the Salesforce ecosystem works. And you mentioned London Calling, we've got one in Cambridge. And again, there's also things like the code cutters. There's the competitions you can go to, and you get given an idea to build something, and people go and build stuff in floors over like an 8-hour period and see who can come up with the best solution to do something new without actually writing a line of code. And I don't I don't think I'm aware of that anywhere else outside of
Mm.
maybe the gaming industry with like their gaming jams and their IT security. So it seems to be quite a huge thing, and you're definitely right. It is very positive overall. Most of the time, if you want help, I might get in trouble for this, but you can Google it and you
Yeah,
will find so many communities, Reddit, threads,
yeah.
subreddits, all sorts of places, GitHub repositories, and they'll just be stacked with someone who had your issue a year or two ago. Sometimes, I think I Googled something the other week and I found something from 8 years ago, which was still applicable.
Yeah.
You don't get that if it wasn't a positive environment. I don't think you would find that.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that's yeah, and I think that's one of the pluses of working in Salesforce and the community for sure. So let's pivot a little bit more about you. So what does a typical day look like for you, and then also what tools or habits do you use to sort of keep yourself organized and on track?
Okay. I think the only thing that's actually typical for me is I start my day with my email and my Teams notifications. I think it's universal because Hyphen8 deals with projects and we have managed service and obviously we have all of the pre-sales that go with it. Depending on where I'm allocated to from like a resource perspective, depending on what my actual project workload is, or if I'm on the managed services team for the week, or if I'm helping with pre-sales, my day itself after I've checked my emails and notifications changes. Um, I'm on the project side of the business, so I'm going to make up a bit of a typical day because it does change, but it's normally things like emails and notifications, get them out of the way. Normally in a project, you're asking questions from the customers, you're asking for breakdowns of what their forms look like, what their fields look like, what the particular business process is. So sometimes there's a lot of back and forth, just trying to make sure you understand it, organizing a call so that we can sit down and have that kind of scoping, discovery, consulting, essentially part of it. Um, and then it kind of changes. So some days are all calls. Some days you can just be sat there trying to figure things out, understanding what it is they're doing, showing the customer what you've maybe already built. Other days could be all about documenting. So it could be doing that more the technical architecture side of things. It could be creating your ERDs, so your relationship diagrams of how well everything in Salesforce is going to relate together, putting your process maps together, getting your high level design document together, getting your estimates together if it's more of a pre-salesy day. Um, and then depending on whether I'm leading a project or I'm on someone else's project, I'm either doing Salesforce stuff, or working with the people who are doing the Salesforce stuff to ensure that they understand the whats and the whys of what they're building and why they're building it so that they can get something as close to perfect as we can. Um, the other side of that is obviously if I'm not on projects, I could be helping with pre-sales. So I might just be trying to understand, well, what is it they're looking to do? Is Salesforce the right tool? And obviously our Evolve team is our managed services. So they more standard IT help desk, I guess.
Yeah.
And the Evolve team are great, but they get such a wide variety of cases coming. It could be, could you help me create a list view? I can't log in. Can you reset my password? To
Yeah.
the well, we've just introduced this entirely new program because of all of the bad weather and the flooding recently. Could you help us build a new form and get a new grant program up and running? So there isn't a typical day,
Yeah.
but there are typical types of days, I suppose.
And I think that's what makes it enjoyable, I guess, as well. That not you're not sort of like clocking in, clocking out. It's varied, and that's what makes it enjoyable, and it not becomes too samey. Everything is different.
100%, 100%.
So let's move a little bit now into sort of some more questioning around your role. So have you got like a standout project where you solve like a particularly complex Salesforce product puzzle and sort of what made that memorable?
Um, oh, this is a hard one. And as much as I kind of assumed this question would be coming, I genuinely have struggled with it because a large part of what I love doing and one of the reasons I've stayed at Hyphen8 is I've probably dealt with over 100 small charities over the last almost decade, and it's making their lives easier. So it's been quite hard to kind of sit and look back and go, I've helped food banks, I've helped children in need, I've helped with all of that stuff indirectly. So picking one more recently is quite hard. Even the really complex ones, and it's not so much the solving the puzzles, it's just because they've all been good in their own way. But I do have an old one that I'm always really quite proud of. So we worked for an organization that they're quite huge in what they do, and they have a lot of checks and balances in places. And their pre-sales, their whole contract negotiation, and the way they had to do things, because they were so versatile in what they delivered, their pre-sales and contract negotiation took up to about 5-6 days of effort. So from choosing the products to generating the contracts to putting everything in place to agreeing on what the timelines would be and actually then getting the contracts out and getting them signed, getting them back into Salesforce and updating the data. We essentially built a bespoke sales system on top of Salesforce, which is a known sales system. And we actually reduced it down to 34 minutes.
Wow. That's
because
incredible.
we made it in such a way that you could kind of have a product picker and the configuration for the product you could set up in Salesforce in advance. So it was kind of like you were just saying, well, I want that product and this product. It would go away and figure out, well, if you've picked this product and this product, then you need contract A, B, and C. Therefore, we need to get data from record 1, 2, and 3, and it would generate all of our contract documents. It would generate all of the requirements that they would then need to do. It would generate the pipeline for when the dates of the checks and the sessions would be. That was the most memorable in terms of one of the hardest projects I'd worked on, but also the biggest difference. And I remember the CEO standing up at a big conference and going, yeah, we've spent a lot of money on this system, but obviously one of the big wins is we've reduced this pipeline from 5 days down to just over 30 minutes. And me and my colleague were sat there just fist bumping at the end of it, going, we did that. 100% we did that.
So I think that comes back to something we talked about a few minutes ago in terms of that the impact you're having there, because it's a charity, etc. Just is so if you make that impact in a corporate, fantastic, yeah, brilliant. But I think when it's a charity, it's just that extra, that little extra push where it's like, that's definitely helping a lot more than just someone. That's helping the mission that they are fighting as well, for sure.
Yeah.
So obviously you've been involved in everything, from sort of bespoke implementations, the grant management side, etc. But I think one skill that I see a lot with consultants as well is being able to balance the technical consulting with understanding the business requirements. So how do you manage that by obviously being super technical, but also making it easy to understand for the customer as well?
I don't want to say I get away with a lot of cat references. I've designed a lot of cat cafes and cat sanctuaries over the years. A lot of a consulting's job is asking the question why. It's figuring out what someone wants and why do they want it. I can talk a lot and I'm quite technically minded, but I always remember that actually most people won't have a clue what an ERD is or a HLD. They won't know what a process map is for. They won't understand what a record type in Salesforce is, let alone a page layout. It might sound really obvious to someone who's a standard user of Salesforce because they come across the terminology. Like people who go, I've heard of Salesforce because of the Formula One. Once you've used it, you'd recognize it, but a lot of people haven't used it. So it starts with asking those questions of, well, what do you want and why do you want it? And then I like to get Salesforce open, even if it's my own dev org from 10 years ago, which has got my Death Star and stuff built in it. And it's got an app, because then I can point and I can click and I can show them and I can create contact records on the fly and I can mess around and show you what a list view is and show you my cat sanctuary. Hyphen8 specifically have a really good demo org. I'm going to claim absolutely no. I didn't build it in any way, shape, or form, but they've built over the last few years. It's got everything from grant making and fundraising, charity lookups. We've got a portal in there. We've got access to forms. We've got PDF Butler, more recent addition to it as well, so we can show you can do button presses and generate the documents. For new customers, that's normally my biggest tool is actually a pre-existing Salesforce. Otherwise, things like I was going to say Whimsical and what's the other one called? Lucid Spark. That's it. Used to be Lucid Chat. They're brilliant. And Paint.
Okay, yeah.
You're going to
Old
laugh at
school,
the
eh?
Paint.
Old
Yeah,
school
but
paint,
there's
yeah.
something special about being able to open a box, draw some squares, write in, a customer specific thing, point it at another customer specific thing, and relate what you're talking about to what they know. And
Yeah.
if you can show something very similar as well, whilst using their terminology, that's the best tool. So communication isn't actually a tool. It's obviously a tool, a personal skill, or something a consultant needs. But no, Salesforce, Paint, Lucid, anything
Yeah.
visual more than anything, I think.
I think to your point, it's about trying to make it relevant for them. And I found this working in with a lot of nonprofits that we do as well, is that they're not always, I won't cast them all with the same brush, they're not always as technically savvy maybe as some of the corporate side, because that's not their thing. Their thing is to feed the hungry, to look after sick kids. That's their thing. So that's why they do need sometimes a little bit more. And that's why companies like you guys at Hyphen8 are so great at that, because you can really explain what they need. Because sometimes they just don't know what they need. Their customers don't know what they don't know. And I think that's where
Yeah,
your role comes in to explain that. And again, coming back always asking why. It's like, yeah, but not just because you've done that for 10 years doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to do. And sometimes that's
yeah.
hard for customers to go, oh yeah, you're right. That doesn't make any sense now. It made sense 10 years ago, but maybe not so much today.
No, and that's one of the things. It's something I've always been aware of, but it is something I've definitely got better at over the last few years, especially. So Hyphen8, it wasn't that long ago. I think it was a couple of years ago. We actually introduced a service design element specifically to Hyphen8, separate to what I would have said like a tech lead or a solutions consultant or a senior solutions consultant would do. Obviously, I mentioned right at the start, part of our job is similar to that of a solutions architect. We have to do the workshops to understand what they want so that we can design something that they will be able to use that will meet all of their requirements. Some of the more senior people will ask well, why do you do that? And it's because Bob does it. Well, why does Bob does it? What is Bob actually gaining? What are you gaining from like a reporting or an auditing perspective by doing that? I found that a lot of people don't really do that as much. And I never used to do it a lot. I could put my hand up to that. I always ask the why. I tried to understand what it is they're doing and why. And if I could think of a better way, I'd recommend it. But since we kind of introduced service designers as a set kind of role, that maybe you'll be interviewing a service designer one day, they really do go into the nitty gritty of, well, what is your business process and why is that your business process? Working with them has been, I don't want to say eye-opening, but very educational. Very much
Mm.
adds and supplements what I find a solution consultant does.
Yeah, interesting for sure. So actually, we talk about customers in a little bit. So, what strategies do you use to ensure that the client's long-term success with the solutions that you deliver?
I think that's going to be different depending on who you speak to. Because I think that's a bit like a developer. We always have our own style and way of doing things. I I try to think ahead in terms of, well, what is it that you're doing now and what might you do in the future? So if I use a grant maker as an example, a grant maker is someone who has access to either a pot of money or they fundraise to have a pot of money that they then use to give away to either people or businesses or other charities who are delivering a specific thing. So a lot of the questions I ask, and I think I can say the same for the vast majority of the consultants at Hyphen8, one of the kind of key things we do is ask, is that always what you're going to do? Do you have any, aspirations to offer more, to maybe move into areas that you don't do? that kind of pre-warns us as to whether or not something is going to be a very specific thing that they will always do this way, or it's actually something that might evolve and change. And as you know with Salesforce, and probably anyone watching this knows with Salesforce, you can build something in Salesforce that works one specific way. And you've got things like record types and you've got pick lists. You've got the ability to build things in such a way that you're not tied to doing it one particular way. It's a very good flexible part system. So we always try to future proof as much as we can. Part of that does go back to the ask and why. What is it you're doing? Is there potential for growth and change? But it means when we're actually building code or flaws, custom bespoke stuff, we try to avoid it if we can and use out of the box stuff, because the more out of the box stuff we use, the easier it is for them to manage and maintain 5-10 years down the line. I've got a customer I could quite happily talk to on this because I designed their system 7 or 8 years ago. They're still a customer of ours and it's still evolving. And thankfully, touch wood, hasn't had to have anything rebuilt. It's just always been added to or extended. But it does mean if you do go down the flow route or the code route, we try to build in such a way that it's not hard coded, so it's not specific to this one thing. Is there scope? Can we make it so that if in 2 years they want to do something new, can we add to it or can we reuse it? We don't always succeed. You're always going to get people who go, no, we do this one thing and it has to be done this one specific way. And the nature of being any type of developer is sometimes you just have to build a thing to do a specific thing.
Yeah.
But we try to minimize that.
Future-proof it and make it scalable as well. So hopefully the customer, we all hope our customers grow, because therefore we grow then as consultants or as ISVs, we all grow together. So that's all, making it future-proof and scalable obviously is an important part of that. So as we start to sort of wind down, so a couple of last questions for you. What advice would you give to somebody who is interested in sort of maybe transitioning into that Salesforce consulting role?
Be willing to learn. Be willing to learn and just accept you don't know everything. You won't know everything. You never will know everything. As that might sound a bit like a negative thing to start with, but consultants, you're always learning. Salesforce is always growing. You have to step out of your comfort zone. And sometimes you have to accept that even if you're the most senior person, you're on a team, it's not a you thing. And if you were in a really bigger organization, you're doing several people's jobs as a solutions consultant, especially in smaller organizations, smaller medium enterprises. You do system architecture, you do the technical elements, you do the admin work. Sometimes we have technical consultants who do the development work as well. I haven't done much code since Lightning became a thing because I was a programmer, not a scripter, but you have to accept that it will change and it will grow and you won't know everything, but your job really is to understand what you can do with the core of the systems and where you can go to find out. Admittedly, I'm getting grey, so I've been doing this a while, so I think my repository of where I can go to find out stuff is a lot bigger than someone who's going to start. But ask questions. And consulting, I think this one of the funniest things I ever say to consultants, especially new people, is you're a consultant. Part of being a consultant is you have to consult, which means you have to be able to talk to someone, ask them questions, even if you disagree with what they're wanting to do. Ask why, ask what for, what is the aim, have conversations. So I suppose that kind of, to boil it down, it's be willing to learn, accept you don't know everything, work with your team, because you're never really alone. Unless you're a really small consultancy, you're unlikely to going to be on your own. And even if you're on your own on a project, you've got teammates, you've got colleagues. Just be willing, genuinely be willing to learn and ask the questions. I think that's the best bit of advice I can give to anyone.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think I always say to when we like it's similar when we get new hires in the company is like ask questions. There's no there generally isn't anything. There isn't a stupid question. Maybe don't ask me the same question 3 times, but ask questions because for me, when I manage people, is like if you're asking questions and you're thinking, you're working, you're not sort of just plodding along. So I think the questions is good. And I've said it to I've got younger brothers, etc. It's like, yeah, when you're in a job, ask questions.
Oh
Most
yeah,
people want to. Most humans want to answer and help as a
yeah.
base. That's where most humans stand. Okay, there's always some exceptions, of course, but most humans stand at that point where they want to
Agreed.
help. And if you show interest, then people will willing to give their time to you as well.
Yeah, I think funnily enough, you said there's no such thing as stupid questions. Whenever I run a scoping session or a discovery session or a show and tell or a playback, I am probably well known for starting every single one with, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see my screen? Great. Now,
Yeah.
before we begin, I have one rule and I only have one rule. There's no such thing as stupid questions, just stuff we don't know. So
Yeah.
if you think of something, if you have a question, there's a good chance someone else is thinking it. And
Yeah.
if you're thinking this question, that means I might not have understood something. Because if you're thinking something because I'm saying something, then either I've not got this right,
Mm.
or you thought of something we've maybe missed, or maybe you just don't know something and I need to explain it to you. And in all scenarios, that is good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Because it just sometimes it makes you think again. So, oh yeah, maybe I didn't explain that properly, like you said, yeah, or I didn't understand it, and yeah, or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, perfect. So final question. So outside of work, so what helps you sort of recharge and sort of maintain balance? Is it hobbies or anything you're passionate about outside of work?
So I think I mentioned right back at the start, I'm a kid, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So I was around when the Atari and the Master System and the Mega Drive and the PlayStation came out. So I may be, what is this, a year and 6 days off turning 40, but I still will very much sit down and play a game to chill out and relax. In terms of the switch brain off, play games, press X to
Yeah.
win type thing. But in terms of actual hobbies, I very much enjoy playing Warhammer.
Okay. Yep.
Building, buying the miniatures, painting them. In Hyphen8, one of the kind of core principles we try to do is obviously have fun with what we do. We have a hobby group called Hyphencraft. So
Oh, fantastic.
we have quite a few people who different things like we have someone who does bits of woodwork, someone does flower arranging. I build and paint plastic miniatures, so you will see pictures come up every now and then from me where I've tried to learn to use an airbrush or stick bits of wire onto a model to make it look like, it's got lightning coming off an axe or something. So that is I'm not even going to say guilty pleasure. I just enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a great crafting hobby and it's creative. And I always try and encourage everyone to get a creative hobby of some kind because it's fun. It teaches you new things. It keeps you active. That and Warhammer is just fun to play, so I get to play more games.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
to
yeah.
be
I've
a
got some.
geek
Yeah, yeah.
forever, so it's fine by me.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I've got some friends who, yeah, and it's a whole world. I'm like, wow, this is like again, it's a whole community. Again, it's funny, isn't it? It's whatever hobby or that you have, there's a community for it. I run, but there's a community for that, and there's the Warhammer community, or you do flower range or whatever it is. There's a whole community just in and around whatever it is, and I think that's great. And I think also, I think the craft, the more craft ones are also it's that mindfulness. I think that gets talked about a lot now, which is great, mental health, etc. And that's something that's mindfulness. So you are painting those figures,
Mm,
but actually your brain is sort of just chilled. You're not necessarily
yeah.
because I've seen them. They're so small. You've got to concentrate, so you can't really be thinking about anything too much else.
Yeah, I've tried to listen to audiobooks, listen to music,
Yeah,
watch a film in the background. I'm gonna say if it's a dumb action film. So if it's
yeah.
like I'm gonna get sued for this. If it's like
Go Die
Fast and
Hard. Yeah,
Furious or
yeah,
Die Hard, you can just
yeah,
watch that. And Die Hard is the best Christmas movie ever. So, it's
yeah.
perfect one to be putting on. You can just kind of put it on and you can do it and you can kind of just concentrate on it. but no, it is good fun. And you're right, it is a community that has grown absolutely massively. It's got some
Yeah.
quite famous faces to it nowadays as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, exactly. Yeah, and come back. I don't think there is such a thing as a guilty pleasure. I think it's just something that you enjoy, and people just own it, own what you enjoy. I think, and because there's other people out there who do, etc. So yeah, there shouldn't be any stigma attached to anything anybody does. I
no,
think it's all
it's what
we're all yeah.
one of the definite positive things of Hyphen8 as well, from a because I've been here for such a while, is not only do we obviously have lots of fun customers, they do really try to keep that positive mental well-being attitude going. So things like the hyphen craft, and we've got a book club as well that gets together
Mm,
every few months, and they've read a book. So they're making me read books that I would never normally pick up off a shelf.
mm,
So it's
yeah,
good. It's nice. But yeah,
no, excellent.
plenty of hobbies, not enough time to do it all though.
Yeah, that's the shame. Right? At some point, we're retired and we have all the time in the world for them. But until then, we've got to split the time for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Anthony, thank you very much for joining us. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I'm
Thank
sure
you
we'll
for
speak
having me.
again.
Well,
Cheers.
indeed. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye bye.